Ever wonder how to capture the quiet, haunting beauty of an abandoned industrial complex? Today, I'll guide you step by step to bring this scene to life with watercolor, focusing on perspective, texture, and mood. We'll start with a drawing, then layer washes to build depth from weathered buildings to winding rails. In the end, you'll have a moody, atmospheric scene that tells the story of forgotten tracks. This scene features one-point perspective. I want to cover a little bit about one-point perspective as a review for those of you who have studied it. If this doesn't make sense to you, there are a cajillion videos on YouTube about one-point perspective, two-point perspective, etc. So if you're confused about that, I suggest that you look those up. To show perspective, we need to show the slant of the buildings because as you're looking at it, it's on a 2D plane. The photo is 2D. But we can see that as the buildings go into the distance, it's as if their roofs are sloped. It's an illusion. But capturing this illusion will make your scene look like you're actually standing there in the place. It'll look realistic. I'm drawing lines on the screen that go along the edges of the rooftops or the bottoms of the buildings where they meet the pavement or sidewalk. All these lines will converge together in what we call the vanishing point, which is also the same as the horizon line that would be at eye level. Here are the paints that I'll be using in this painting. I'll be using an Arches watercolor block, 140-pound cold-pressed, 12 by 16 inches. This drawing I'm starting without the gates and without the electric poles. Because I hand drew this and didn't trace it, the objects might not be exactly where they would be as if I had traced it. So by leaving those other elements out at the moment, that will allow me to get the first washes done and then be able to figure out exactly where I want to place those gates to make sure that they fit into the drawing correctly. You can see in my drawing that the buildings are slanted, just like I was talking about in the little discussion on perspective. I've been working wet into wet on the buildings and with these weeds. The colors are, for the building, I'm using a blend of Cobalt Turquoise and Manganese Blue Hue plus my special gray. And for the weeds, I'm using Serpentine Genuine. For the background trees, I'm using Undersea green, which will granulate a little bit and give some texture. I've started out wet on dry and then working wet into wet, putting in some clear water for some backwashes in the trees as well. I'm leaving a little bit of a gap between the two sides of the trees to try to give the idea that you're fading into the distance and there's something unknown beyond the vision of the tracks. While I'm working on the mid-ground weeds and the rails, I want to explain a little bit about the strategy I'm using for the colors of the buildings. The buildings on the left are mostly blue in color with some gray, while the buildings on the right are white in shadow, making them gray, plus they have old soot and dirt and stuff that's run down the buildings over time and has never been cleaned off. I'm going to put a little bit of the blue into those white buildings to help unify them with the blue buildings on the left. And as you can see, I've also let the tree color run into the buildings on the left. It's a way of letting your colors cross over from one side to the other, and that helps unify the composition. For most of these shapes, I'm starting wet on dry, and then as I'm laying down the wash, I'm then working wet into wet. After this step, I'm going to let the paper dry, and then I'm going to draw in the railroad gates, as well as the electric poles. There are very few clouds in this photo, and I just love clouds, particularly puffy white clouds, so I'm doing my own clouds. The first thing I do is I block out the shapes of the clouds by painting the sky. And the sky in this case is a combination of cobalt blue and some manganese blue hue. Then I'm going to go back and put in the shadows using a little bit of the special grade that I mixed up. If you don't yet have the hang of painting watercolor clouds, check out my playlist on painting watercolor clouds. I'm continuing to brush in the shadows on the clouds, wet into wet with this smaller brush. I'm brushing in the base of the gate with my custom gray, and then immediately adding in Serpentine Genuine for the weeds. This gives the illusion that the weeds are in front of the base, and also it allows these shapes to touch each other and actually be one shape. This helps give your painting unity. At this point in the painting process, though I have laid down some darks, a lot of the shapes don't have all the shadows or all the value that I want. And so I'm starting to build up that value layer by layer. Some of these shadows I'll leave as I put them down the first time, and some of them I'll actually go back and I will make them darker, or I'll add other colors to help give them dimension. A note about the windows. I have found that in even the most detailed yet impressionistic watercolor compositions of urban landscapes, windows are not always super well defined. And for me, when I try to make my windows look perfect and every detail is there, they end up looking fake. So these windows are a little sketchy on purpose. This scene is actually from Lockport, New York, and if any of you are familiar with Western New York, Lockport is famous for its huge locks on the Erie Canal. Now, there are other branches of the Erie Canal. There's an Erie Canal somewhere in the middle of Ohio that I don't think is connected anymore. But this is right by Lake Ontario, not Lake Erie. It's about 30 minutes from Niagara Falls. In order for the gate on the right-hand side of the tracks to show up, I needed to pull off some of the green of the trees. So I'm using some lifting by putting down clean water, wetting the paint, and then blotting with a tissue. I'm putting on a second layer of the custom gray to start to make the warning lights look black. I dropped in some Perylene Maroon for the red lights, but they're kind of light. I think I'm going to go back over them later. My father was from Lockport. We used to visit his father when I was growing up, and my grandfather's house was right near the tracks. Not these tracks, well, maybe these tracks, but not on the street. The trains would come through at night, and we kids would get so excited and would try to see out the window. We just couldn't see it. All we could see were the taillights of the cars waiting for the train to pass. And it was endless frustration for us little kids wanting to see that train. Notice how the line that I painted for this rail that's coming into the foreground ended up with a little bit of dry brush technique. I didn't really plan it that way, but I like it. And I want to utilize it to help give the feeling of age. I think that texture in watercolor paintings can suggest age. I'm going to work on the railroad ties, and I want to try to do it in such a way that I don't lose that dry brush technique that I had just done. I think I might lose a little bit of it, but I think I can maintain enough of it to where I can continue to convey that sense of age and abandonment. You also notice that as I drop in the Serpentine Genuine for the weeds, that I'm getting some backwash effects, which also adds to the texture and again, hopefully gives the sense of age and being forgotten. Notice how I'm going to drop in some water on the Serpentine Genuine for the weeds, which will cause a backwash, making texture. I like how the soot and dirt on the base of the right-hand side building looks, but I feel like there is a potential for more shadow, so I've lengthened the shadow. I don't have the steadiest hand, so sometimes I have to redo wires. Painting in the wires in these industrial scenes really helps with the atmosphere. But I didn't like how they turned out, so I'll scrub some of them out. I scrubbed them out with a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. All you have to do is tear off a piece, dip it in some water to make it damp, and then you can scrub on the paper and it won't harm the paper. Now I'm going back with this white ink. It's better than gouache, and restoring some of the highlights that I've lost, and you'll see that it really does make a difference.